My name is Anthony Elmore. I am president and founder of the Proud Black Buddhist World Association. Many of you have not heard anything about Buddhism or how Buddhism relates to daily life. We who are Nichiren Buddhists study the Lotus Sutra. In the Lotus Sutra it reads, they look upon Buddhism, or they look upon secular matters in terms of Buddhism, whereas the Lotus Sutra teaches that secular matters are the entirety of Buddhism. Now, when you look upon others who look at secular matters in terms of Buddhism, these are the religions of Buddhism that has come to America, where they look upon Buddhism or they look upon secular matters in terms of Buddhism. They don't look upon secular matters as the entirety of Buddhism, because the kind of Buddhism that has come to America is a Buddhism that's actually a Brahmanism, or not a true Buddhist religion, because the true Buddhist religion looks upon secular matters as the entirety of Buddhism. Now, my lecture today is called Police Shooting of Unarmed Black Youth in America, and we talk about the killing of unarmed teenager Mike Brown and police killings in America. Let's get into our lecture. The second chapter of the Lotus Sutra reads, only Buddhas know the true entity of all phenomena. That is, appearance, nature, entity, power, influence, inherent cause, relationship, latent effect, manifest effect, and the consistency of the beginning to the end. If we are going to talk about the police killing of unarmed youth in America, the Buddhist religion actually can't explain any kind of phenomena. Now, let us begin to get into the killing of Mike Brown. We in America, at the time of this lecture, have been going through just about 2 weeks of protests in America. President Obama has mentioned this. We got people in Egypt talking about this unrest and over zealous police officers, and looking like we are not an American country, with all these firepower they're bringing out against unarmed American protesters who are protesting the killing of an African American youth in America. This is not a phenomenon that just happens. We in Buddhism can explain this. And now, one of the things I'd like to point out is that when you look at Buddhists in America, and particularly some of the Buddhist sects, they are so much into Buddhism that they don't get off into secular matters. That's why the Lotus Sutra says that secular matters are the entirety of Buddhism, whereas they are looking at Buddhism outside of the realm of secular matters. Now, let's go and use the Lotus Sutra to explain what happened. Now, about 2 weeks ago, and most of you who are in touch with current events, who have an understanding of the news, have been watching the news, the president or the attorney general who was just in Ferguson, Missouri just 2 days ago, Eric Holder, who came there because the President of the United States was concerned about the unrest, the over-militarization of our police departments. What does Buddhism say about that? What happened? What is this appearance? Now, the Buddhist religion can explain this. Now, what happened in Missouri? They're saying, don't shoot, hands up, because what happens is that there are over 500 deaths a year where police officers target and shoot African Americans. This does not happen to white people. They're not killing white people. They'll take a gun and shoot a white man in the leg. They'll disarm a white man, but they are not killing white people. Now, the Buddha says, only Buddhists understand the true entity of all phenomena. Let us look at how Buddhism, or how the Buddhist teachings deal with phenomena. Now, why is it that we have white policemen killing unarmed black youth? Why is it that we have the story of a Trayvon Martin and people all over America are protesting the killing of unarmed black youth? Now, Buddhists understand the true entity of phenomena, but let me give you a Buddhist understanding. And one of the things that you would not find in America, you would not find Buddhists getting involved in secular matters, because what they're doing, they're teaching you Buddhism as opposed to teaching you the true Buddhism of Shakyamuni Buddha, because the true Buddhism of Shakyamuni is based on the Dharma, the eightfold teachings of the Buddha. And we'll get into the eightfold teachings of the Buddha, but let us begin to understand from a Buddhist standpoint, how is it that white police officers kill so many unarmed black youth? Where does this phenomenon happen, and why does this happen in America, and how do we allow this to happen, and how can we change this, and how can the Buddhist religion be a part of this change? Now, the Buddha says only Buddhists know the true entity of all phenomena. Why is it that white police officers kill black youth? Now, thousands of years ago, maybe 800 years before the Buddha emerged, there was a war, a 1,000-year war, that happened in India. This war was called the Mahabharata. The Mahabharata meant the Great War. And after 1,000 years of warring in India between the Aryans and the indigenous people, the Aryans created a religion. They created a religion, or a perverted religion, that was based on Buddhas before Shakyamuni Buddha, and they got a distorted or perverted view of the world. This religion came down as Brahmanism. In the Brahmin religion, ladies and gentlemen, they developed the most inhumane treatment of humans against humans in the history of mankind. They created a perversion. They created what is known as the caste system. The messenger of the Buddha, Nichiren Shonin, who lived in 13th century Japan, writes in the Gosho that Brahman teachings are distorted teachings of Buddhas who came before Shakyamuni Buddha. When you study Brahman teachings, there's a teachings called the laws of Manu. And you will find that in these teachings, you will find the most inhumane teachings against humanity that's ever been done on any human in the world. It was the worst teachings ever, the teachings of Manu, that they were actually worse than slavery in America. Now, what the Brahmins taught, the Brahmins taught a caste system. This caste system, or this perversion of these Buddhist teachings, actually were so powerful that they affect us today, because the Brahmins' teachings actually got into the world and affected the whole world. Now, when you look at the teachings of Abraham, Abraham means a Brahmin. It means a Brahmin. Now, so that means the teachings of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, actually the basis of those teachings actually come from Brahmanism, because Abraham was a Brahmin, and the teachings of the god Brahma or the Brahmanisms are actually Brahmin teachings. Now, you ask the question and say, well, how does this affect, or how does such a cause of Brahmanism has something to do with 3,000 years later that happened in Ferguson, Missouri? Well, I'll explain it to you. What the Brahmin teachings did was the Brahmin teachings taught a religion that separates human beings. It separates human beings into a system called caste. So the caste system is actually a system or a sanctified religious teachings that teach that one human being is better than the next human being. And throughout our history or throughout our culture, the Brahmin teachings put white at the top and put black at the bottom. And from the time the Brahmin teachings started, they taught a system of racism. This racist system has been the codex, or it has been within the framework of people for thousands of years. Now, for example, when you go into the teachings of the Christian religion and how the Christian religion emerged, you will find that King Constantine practiced the Brahmin teachings, or the Krishna. These teachings got into the Catholic religion. When the Catholic religion started, after the Council of Nicaea in 323 AD, what they did was they integrated the Brahmin teachings into the Christian teachings. This is why, or where, when the Catholic Church set up, they were actually Brahmins. Now, for example, when you go into the Inquisition, that is, when the European explorers were coming to the Americas after the Americas were discovered, or when they found out about America, they had to go to the Catholic Church to get permission to conquer and kill the people. And the Catholic Church, with its Brahmin philosophy, actually gave permission to go and conquer people in the name of religion. When you come into America, and America was formed, even though America was based on religious teachings and religious freedom, the religion had already been affected with Brahmanism, because They taught in the religion that the people who were African, the people who were dark, these people were not human beings. That when they wrote the Constitution of the United States of America, black people were 3/5 of a human being. You were not a full human under the original Constitution of the United States of America. So for years, they could rape black women. They could kill black men. This is in the DNA, in the consciousness of people. They have taught thousands and thousands of years of fear. Now, when you go and you study American history, you will find out that it's only 50 years ago that we come into a modern America. That 50 years ago, President Lyndon Baines Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964. That is the start of a modern America. Because prior to 1964, we had sanctioned religious discrimination in America. Blacks could not live in a certain neighborhood. We could not go to certain schools. You could not marry various people. This was only 50 years ago in America. Now, let's go into Ferguson, Missouri and understand the psychology of the police officers. Let's look at the cause and effect relationship, because Buddhism is cause and effect. Now, Ferguson, Missouri, if you understand the cause of Ferguson, Missouri was a town called a sundown town. What is a sundown town? A sundown town are cities throughout America that if you were black, you had to be out of town by sundown, or you would get arrested or killed or shot on sight. Now, even though laws have been passed in America, even though we have an African-American president, what you have is a culture in America, you have a culture of fear. You have a subconscious people who subconsciously, whether they overtly believe it or not, they are subconsciously racist. They did a study in psychology of little children. And they say, pick a white doll and pick a black doll. And all of the children picked the white doll as being good and the black doll as being bad. Because inherently we have a system of racism. A system that you may not even know, because this is in our subconscious mind. You hear the story that, well, the police that killed Mike Brown was a good man. Of course he could be a good man. Of course you got good people in the world. But when a white man, a white police officer see a black man, subconsciously, there is a sense of fear. There is a sense of intimidation.
Trying to lock somebody up for breaking up a fight.
There are thousands and thousands and thousands of years of hatred, of fear. These things are in the subconscious. It is in the DNA, and we must extricate the hate, the fear, the racism. We must condition ourselves and begin to get a practical to be able to extricate racism out of our system. For example, we call ourselves the Proud Black Buddhist World Association. You have white people who fear the name black, because when you say you're black Buddhist, they take this as meaning that you hate white people. We don't hate white people. Black only means cultural. We're only asking
once again,
to
police beating up on people.
understand. Let us bring this Buddhist lecture to a close. One of the things that I want to point out that in Ferguson, Missouri, what you have is that you have 70% of the population as African American, and you have 30% white. Now, but on the police department, you have 50 white police officers and 3 black. That is inequity. Not only do you have 50 white police officers, you have white police officers who do not even live in the neighborhood or know the people. They're outside. That's why they can bring all of the tanks and the militarization there, because they only see the people in the neighborhood not as human, but they just see them as animals. As one of the police officers says, "You animal, I will kill you." Now,
what's your name, sir?
Now that you can see very clearly
your name, go fuck yourself, all right? Go fuck yourself.
The inequity that's happening in Ferguson, Missouri, even in the Buddhist religion. I got into it with Japanese priests because it's the same thing. You saw in St. Louis, Missouri, a young man who was mental ill, and everybody knew the young man was mentally ill. But when the police saw that young man, and let's show you some of the video, they gunned down this young man like he was a dog. Now, had those police officers, or those white police officers lived in the neighborhood, and they had neighborhood police, and they would know, this is such a person. We know he's mentally ill. And let's be gentle with him instead of shooting him like he's a dog. And it's the same thing in our Buddhist religion. Ladies and gentlemen, 2 years ago, a Nichiren Shoshu priest by the name of Shoshin Iwaki came into this very house and told me that let's leave culture out of Buddhism. How is it, ladies and gentlemen, that a Japanese priest, or Japanese people who live way in Japan, who's brought up in Japan, is going to come to our neighborhoods and teach us Buddhism? They cannot teach you Buddhism because they don't know the culture of the people. You should not allow outside people to come in and teach you Buddhism. That is not Buddhism. That's Japanese domination. And some of the SCI members may get very upset with me. But there's a leader in Japan by the name of Daisuke Keita. Certainly, he may have 500 degrees or break the Guinness Book of World Records of having college degrees, but this man does not know the heart and soul of people in America. He does not understand. He cannot understand this man lives in Japan. The high priest of Nichiren Shoshu lives in Japan, and yet he sends Japanese priests to teach us in our community when you don't know the first thing about it. Anyway, let me get off that soapbox and bring this lecture to a conclusion. It is the Lotus Sutra that teaches us that secular matters are the entirety of Buddhism. One of the things that's happening, and one of the things about Buddhism that we've talked to you before about, and that is sentient and insentient beings. A sentient being is a being or a life form that can reproduce itself, and an insentient being is a life form that we as humans use as an extension of ourselves. Fortunately, someone has invented what is called a camera. And now police officers will be able to put a camera and a microphone. Because recently in New York, we saw a police officer take a young man in a chokehold and kill that man by asphyxiation, choked him to death. This is the attitude of white police officers, and if it was not for a camera, this police officer can get away with murder. The way that we are going to change America is by using the law of cause and effect. Change just does not happen by itself, ladies and gentlemen. We must change ourselves. Nichiren Shonin says in the Go Show that don't seek this Gohanzen outside of yourself, but the Gohanzen is found only in the mortal flesh. It is not a land that's pure or impure in themselves. The pureness are only in our minds, and we must condition our minds. We must, whereas you may not could understand, or you may say that you're not racist. You may not be racist, but subconsciously you have thousands of years of teachings that have taught you that black is bad and black people are bad, and you may not have this in your mind consciously, but subconsciously that hate and that fear exists because it exists in our culture. And what we have to do is use the law of cause and effect. We must protest. We must get out and we must make changes, and we must protect ourselves. That's why we need a camera on every police car and on the police officers. So when the police officers know that they're being watched, know that they're being on camera, then they can actually condition themselves to actually watch what they're doing, because Buddhism or the Buddhist teachings or to this Gohanzen that we practice, it's watching ourselves. It's looking at ourselves, because the Gohanzen is a mirror to ourselves. If we are engulfed by the world of anger or the world of animality, and we do not look at the next person as a Buddha, then you're not going to treat him as a Buddha. Now, if you put that camera on people and you have that camera, then you can practice your act. But anyway, let me close this Buddhist lecture with a few words of the Buddha. Actually, we're going to close it with a few words of the messenger of the Buddha Shakyamuni. He says in the Go Show, the true aspect of all phenomena, he says, in this letter, I read my most important teachings. Grasp their meaning firmly and make them a part of your life. Believe in the Gohanzen, the supreme object of devotion, and all Jambu Divipa. Be sure to strengthen your faith and receive the protection of Shakyamuni, many treasures, and the Buddhas of the 10 directions. Exert yourself in the 2 ways of practice and study. Without practice and study, there can be no Buddhism. You must not only persevere yourself, you must teach others. Both practice and study arise from faith. Teach others to the best of your ability, even if it is only a single sentence or phrase. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. With my deepest respect, Nichiren. That is the messenger of the Buddha. We at the Proud Black Buddhist World Association try to teach others about Buddhism to the best of our ability. We're following the messenger of the Buddha, and we hope that we've taught you something. Do have a nice day. Thank you very much.